Tabletop Arcanum's first and introductory episode. I'm Justin, and my co-host sitting across from me is...
Ricky.
And we're here to kind of talk to you about board games, tabletop games, whether it's going to be miniatures, whether it's going to be RPGs. Primarily, we're going to sit around and talk about board games.
Whether it's news or it's experiences that we've had playing, we just want to make sure that you have everything you need to know before you jump into something new.
So, welcome. Join us on this adventure exploring the hobby.
So, to start with, I do want to ask you, Justin, I'm sitting here in a room full of your games. How long have you actually been playing?
If we want to be truthful to ourselves, I've been in the hobby for about 20 years. Started when I was a kid, grew up on it. Like most people probably encounter the Monopoly, sorry level of things that, we're talking 20 years ago. But that's what kind of was around. We're not in the age of board games that we are in now, back then. But I kind of cut my teeth on, I want to say it was Empire Builder by Mayfair Games as like the first real meaty game I played with. That was with my parents, and I was infatuated with trains, so a train-themed board game made a lot of sense. Kept us kind of keeping going as a family, and ever since then I've always had games in my background, in my pocket, and went from video games to board games to card games to back to video games, back to board games. Been playing RPGs for 20 years now too, so yeah, that's my benchmark of where I'm sitting.
And you've worked at a game store, you've worked at a video game store, so you've kind of not only played, but you've had to sell and understand the games to show off. So that is very impressive.
No, that is the years of retail behind me that I have those waking nightmares from. But it's actually a great thing to be able to sell an item or product or service that you're passionate about, which was kind of where I was at that point in my life. So, and for those who are thinking about a job in that, most of the time you get an employee discount, which then fuels your hobby, which actually ends up typically meaning you're going to spend more on it rather than save on it. Don't fool yourself. Just enjoy the discount and don't look at the bottom line if you can help it.
You don't dig into your own supply. Just sell the games.
Yeah. There's a whole rabbit hole we can go down on that. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background in the hobby and the industry. Just seeing where we go from there, because now I want to share that passion, share that knowledge, and hopefully fill some sort of niche that isn't quite there. Here we are.
There we are. All right. So, well, for me, I've been playing video games my entire life. I kind of made the transition from video games over to board games, probably say 10-ish years ago. Played a few tabletop RPGs. I unfortunately got sucked down the Warhammer rabbit hole. So that was a good chunk of my life, painting and always losing with my Imperial Guard. But yeah, I'm a rebel gamer who jumps into a game without knowing too much about it, hoping to at least learn something new.
Which could explain the Imperial Guard choice, right?
Oh, it was the cheapest army I could buy to have the most miniatures, to find out that I just had to keep sending wave after wave of my own men.
Yeah, no, that sounds like Imperial Guard 101 in that Warhammer 40k Grimdark future. So you started out in Warhammer and things of that nature and kind of grew into it. So where are you now? What do you like to play?
I typically do a lot of... I'm going to just throw it out there already. Huge Star Wars nut. So anything Star Wars based really draws me right in. So thoroughly enjoying the Edge of the Empire and all the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games.
Yeah, they have a really strong license there
now.
That is literally printing the money.
Yeah, GenCon really made me reevaluate why I'm not buying more, and then made me buy more. So right now I've bought almost every expansion for Star Wars Legion, and I'm painting through them all. So this is my life.
Well, the good news is you have all those Imperial Guard that you practiced on to get better at painting stormtroopers in white armor instead of tan and green.
Yeah. I mean, you can almost put the Imperial Guard next to the Rebels. You almost have a spitting image, but I enjoy Star Wars way too much not to play.
I hear you. It's a big fandom of mine too, so I'm not going to be shy about my love of Star Wars or Star Trek or sci-fi in general. The other rabbit hole I crawl down in is usually the H.P. Lovecraft games.
Mm-hmm. Which again, we go back to Fantasy Flight in there.
Yeah, they kind of have a big license on that one. Now, luckily, that's public domain, so therefore they're not the only one printing board games out there.
Yeah, but
but they are putting out some really high quality stuff in that genre, and we'll definitely talk about that at some point because I have my own thoughts and opinions. Coming from a literary fan side and a board game fan side, it's they do something very different that I'm not sure if Lovecraft himself would be appreciative of, but hey, it's a fun game. It's a fun universe. Any other fun facts about Ricky that our listeners should be aware of, like your love of Star Wars?
I just really, really love Star Wars. Well, other than that, you already brought the trains. Ticket to Ride is a game that finally got my girlfriend to start playing board games with me. So I'm slowly turning her over to the dark side of gaming. I have been playing a lot of the Harry Potter Battle for Hogwarts. Ton of fun. Very, very fun. Very easy to get beginners into, even if they just have a small inclination to Harry Potter.
Right. Kind of going back to what I said earlier. It's that golden age of board games that we're kind of in. And to flashback 10, 20 years ago. Well, maybe more than 10 years ago. I want to say it's been about 15 years that we've kind of hit this, like, building steamroll pile of gaming. Before that, it was very slim pickings. You either it was a Euro game or something of that nature, or it was the Hasbro American style thematic games that were just roll dice move mechanics, and it was very that's what you got, and that everything was like a variation of that, and we're a very different place now. So it's kind of exciting to kind of think about that as far as where it's come, where it's going, and where we are next.
We're also in the age where just because you can license something doesn't mean you can just put out something and slap an image on it. Like all the good old Star Wars games of my childhood that were just reskinned whatever and mechanically didn't make sense, or...
But there's a few gems in there.
There's a few.
Very rare.
Yeah.
No, I definitely hear you on that one. There was definitely a time and place where it was, it has Star Wars on it, so people are going to buy it because it says Star Wars, and now you can't get away with putting out a half-done or reskin product as much. Some things are getting reskinned. I'm not going to lie. I'm staring at a copy of Reign of Cthulhu, which is just Cthulhu Pandemic. But it had to be built off of a very solid game, and they had to do something different with it that made people want to pick up both that and your standard Pandemic.
And I mean, we can even go into 5 Minute Marvel, which is a reskin of 5 Minute Dungeon. I mean, that game is just fun. No matter which one you play, if you're a Marvel fan, it's great just to plop down in front of you and play a few rounds. We played a few rounds last week.
Right.
And we both just thoroughly enjoyed it.
So, that's a little bit about us. That will become more evident as we keep talking about what we like to talk about. So today we actually want to kind of kick this off because you brought it up already. We went to GenCon. So kind of want to do a GenCon recap. We'll kind of start with our day 0 and day 1, and then on our next episode we'll dive into days 2 through 4. And I actually called day 0 because we actually went down Wednesday and got the Fantasy Flight in-flight report. But I want to start off with the fact that you never went to GenCon before.
I've never been, so this is my first time going. I've been to other conventions for all kinds of different hobbies or interests, and didn't necessarily know what to expect with GenCon. I did not expect what happened, and honestly, I don't think anyone, if you haven't been to GenCon, can expect what happens when you get there. It was just a ton of fun. It is a non-stop. It's a living thing. It keeps you going.
Yeah, I hadn't been to GenCon personally in a good long while. it originally started up in Lake Geneva, went to Milwaukee, now is living in Indianapolis. I hadn't gone until it was at Indianapolis, and I went 1 year, did a day, went, wow, that's really cool, and didn't even realize how much I missed by not only just going 1 day, but just not continuing to go.
Well, that's even, I was just talking to you before we started recording about how, we went 4 days, and I'm sitting here going, oh, I didn't realize that this happened, I didn't realize that this happened, we missed so much, and we were just in the thick of it the whole entire time. We got up at 8 in the morning, came home at 1 to 2 in the 8 in the morning, came back at 2 in the morning, 1 or 2 in the morning.
I want to say it was at least 2 on most nights.
Yeah.
I didn't get back to bed till probably 3 on most nights.
Mm-hmm.
And I just rinse and repeated each day until the end. So let's kind of dive right into our big topic today. As far as GenCon Day 0, what our thoughts are, and kind of go from there. The big thing that we did Day 0 was the Fantasy Flight in-flight report, which I really didn't have any real expectations walking in. This was a very unusual year for Fantasy Flight because they were very quiet leading up to it, where I can say 2 years ago they were pitching Mansions of Madness 2nd edition like weeks before, and then we're like, yeah, we're gonna sell it at Gen Con, and then showed it off more. But this year they were very quiet leading up until that day, and for good reason.
They had a lot, right? They also co-sponsored Gen Con, so they had a pretty big quiet lead up, but a big presence there. It was very, 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 very nice.
So they opened with one of my favorites, and as soon as the reel started and I saw the color scheme of their logo, I went, oh, I know exactly what they're gonna announce here, and boom, here comes Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, the board game, which we haven't, 2nd edition was 2005. We haven't seen anything on that one since I want to say maybe 2013 may have been the last expansion.
Are you the reigning champ?
Kind of.
So, fun story. Justin is kind of the reigning champ for Arkham Horror. They haven't put it on in a few years, but you were the last one to win.
Correct. So the Arkham Horror 2nd edition board game came out. They have their event in Minnesota every year called Arkham Nights. It's usually 2 or 3 day event. Lately it's been going down to 2 days. And it's all of their Lovecraft-based games. Started going in 2012. Went up there, they had the Arkham Horror League, which was 3 scenarios that you had to score using their special rules and their special setups with a select list of investigators. And this was like here's your challenge, go. See how well you can do. Me and 2 other friends went up there and dominated that whole challenge. I think we were one of 2 teams that finished all 3 scenarios, let alone in the time frame that they gave us. And got nice little reward plaques, things like that nature. And cool story, we kind of jokingly describe ourselves as the reigning uncontested, undefeated champs of Arkham Horror, but they've never hosted the league since then. That was the last year. They did it the year before, and then the year we went, and they just haven't done it since. And a lot of it's because that game kind of faded out. Eldritch Horror came out, Mansions of Madness came out. A couple years ago, the Arkham Horror, the card game came out. So they've been moving on to different franchises and modes, which is kind of why that's taken kind of a backseat. I'm really excited for 3rd edition because maybe the league's coming back and maybe we can defend that title and actually say, yeah, we are still the champion team. I actually got to play 3rd edition while I was at Gen Con. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next episode because I did that later in the weekend. But if you are thinking about Arkham Horror, talk to your local game store. Or if you don't have a local game store that is convenient to you, you can actually go through Fantasy Flight's website and pre-order it. By pre-ordering it either through your local store or through them, they're throwing in the hardcover deluxe rulebook, which has some extra fluff and lore in there. So, doesn't hurt, doesn't cost you anything extra. Plus, then you can get a copy and not have to worry about it. And then after they showed the case that, they kind of kept going on this, like, hey, it's Lovecraft, let's go. And showed a little bit of the Mansions of Madness video game, Mother's Embrace, which is actually going to be coming out on Steam, which looks like a point-and-click adventure game. I'm not quite sure where they're going with it, but it seemed interesting. It's a definitely different take on what they're doing.
It did bring me back to the days of booting up my Windows 95 desktop and playing all the games that I had on repeat, knowing where everything was. So I'm looking forward to actually being able to jump into there and kind of get the old point-and-click feel, but it was a beautiful game from what they've shown so far.
Right. Then they showed off the Lord of the Rings digital LCG, which if you look at it, it almost looks like Hearthstone. With Lord of the Rings instead of Warcraft, but it's actually they're lifting the actual LCG card game, putting it digitally, and you unlock new cards by making progress in the game. So your decks will get better as long as you keep kind of continuing through that. So they showcased that a little bit. I'm curious to kind of see where they are, because that card game's been around for a while. They're still putting out quality cards and packs and things. I'm just seeing if they're going to make this a joint thing where they're running both concurrently, or is the card game going to fade out because the digital version is going to take over. I hope not, because we played the card game there in what day was that? That was day 2?
That was, yeah.
No, that was Thursday. That was day 1.
Yeah, we played Arkham, and then we played that.
Right, so
within like a 2-hour period or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But that alone makes me want to play that game more. So
yeah.
And they kind of kept rolling with these punches. Like the Lord of the Rings digital game, I knew they were going to talk about because that's coming out really soon, in the next month or two. And then they also brought out that they were doing an expansion for a game that you never thought we would do this, and it ended up being the Game of Thrones 2nd edition board game, which got a couple like mini expansions that they kind of print on demand to kind of advance the timeline, because the timeline of that book is like, or timeline of the game, and as far as the books is like, it's book 1, this is the board game, all the political factions and things like that are just set for that. And their little mini expansions allow you to say, okay, maybe we're at book 2 or book 3 in the series. And so, as if you're a fan of the series, or show, whatever, characters die, things change. So it's a rough world, and some of the cards would swap out, and you would kind of get that, like, okay, now we're at this point in the timeline. But the biggest thing I saw was that they're adding not only the extra player count, so you can actually play up to 8 players. By the way, this game already takes way too long, and it is a heavy, bloated, great game, but you got to dedicate some time to it. And I can only imagine you have to dedicate like what's going to sound like a weekend if you want to play 8 players. Like, all right, you're gonna cook breakfast. I'm gonna set up the game, and then we're gonna all play. We'll call in pizza for lunch, and then you over there, whoever's losing, is going to buy us all dinner. Like, we're going to be eating and playing this game all day. Personally, I can do that. Not everybody can. And I definitely understand where people are like, wow, we're going to add 2 players to an already very long game, and the more times you add players, the longer games get. The thing I did really, really, really want to stress that I loved about this announcement, though, is I can't remember. Have you played this one?
I have not, no.
Okay. So, 3-player count. You have to play... I'm going to have to remember. You have to play, like, Stark, Lannister, and Baratheon. Like, you have to play those houses. And when you add a 4th player, you add Greyjoy. And when you add a 5th player, you add, I believe it's Tyrell. And when you add a 6th player, that's when you get Martell. you can't play those later houses with lower count players. Like it is very much a forced, like, nope, these are the ones, this is who, the number of players, these are the houses. No, you can play Stark this time, I'll play Stark next time, fine. But if we're a smaller group that never sees those higher player count games, we're never going to see those factions in play and experience it. They're changing that with this expansion. You can play any house with any player count.
Oh.
So you want to play Martell? Play Martell. I don't care.
Day one.
With well, I think it's minimum 3-player games if I remember right. But that was one of those things I went, wow, that's a great thing that that game needed to have. I don't know if it needed 8 players, but getting around that house restriction was a good thing. After that, they dived into their other aspect, not just board games anymore. They've got RPGs too, and they've kind of had those for a while. And they're post the new shiny baby is the Legend of the Five Rings RPG. The beginner game launched at GenCon. I think stores are getting it right about now as we're recording this. And they announced the setting book, so you can actually get more into the world of Rokugan. And it's a new edition of a Legend of the Five Rings that's been around. The RPG's been around. But since they got the license from AEG a couple years ago and launched the card game again, and Legend of the Five Rings is back. And now the RPG is back and in a new edition.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to kind of turn this over to you. I've been talking for a little bit here, because we're kind of hitting on what you want to talk about.
Oh, what gave me heart palpitations while we were sitting there. Out of nowhere, they got me. First thing they did for Star Wars Armada was bring out that Super Star Destroyer. Thing's about 1.5 feet long. It was a beautiful, I can't even really say mini because it was a biggie. Starting price $200, but
that's a tough thing to swallow.
Yeah.
I'm not an Armada player. $200 is a high price point. It's a beautiful miniature, and we saw it close up in a case, and like, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty. I do want to talk about a little bit later about a $200 mini that I think destroys it, but that's, I think, your preference versus my preference.
No, yeah, I know which $200 mini you're talking about, and that is a tough choice. But if I was going to make a coffee table around a mini, it would be the Super Star Destroyer. Yeah, that's true. That thing was just truly gorgeous.
So that's the Armada announcement. That was a big shiny thing, and I want to say the room erupted.
Yeah.
Pretty excitedly when that happened too.
It just got crazy in there. It was a beautiful sight.
But then
they went over to Legion. They announced they announced Chewie, and they announced the Wookiee Warriors. So those are going to be coming out soon. They announced that they're going to be putting out 2 personnel expansions, the Rebel and the Imperial Specialists. You get 4 minis each in both of those. They announced X-Wing 2.0, the conversion kits for it. First Order and Resistance are getting their own factions. They showed us a few, like the RZ2 A-Wing and the Mining Guild X-Wing. And I know I sound like I'm going through this very fast, but that's mostly because I'm very excited about what I'm about to say. They announced Clone Wars, and I'm still speechless over this. I mean, the only thing that we got to see for Clone Wars, they announced that they're going to be putting Clone Wars into Legion and X-Wing. The only kind of promo stuff that they threw up was a Jedi Starfighter and the Sith Infiltrator for X-Wing.
No, I'm with you.
Oh, the pictures were beautiful. Yeah. I just can't wait. And honestly, that's what sold me on Legion. I immediately told Justin I needed to go over to the Fantasy Flight booth and pick up as much as I could. And I actually made 3 stops at their booth over the course of the weekend to buy more and more Legion stuff.
Yeah, I was not a good friend to you that day.
You were a great friend. It was amazing.
So not only are we getting that in X-Wing, but we're also getting a Legion. So my Trade Federation droid army to mock your old Imperial Guard of, I'm just going to throw droids at you until they stop.
I'm just gonna
Will
have.
be a thing.
I'm gonna have, and I mean, it's gonna go back also on the Rebel side, or I mean, at least the Galactic Republic. I'm gonna be sending wave after wave of my own clone troopers.
Oh, true.
So
it's just mindless numbers at that point. But when Legion came out, or was announced, and then it came out, and I was always thinking to myself, like, why are we not capitalizing on the Clone Wars era that showcased so much more ground battles, so much more personnel troops? Because if you go back to, like, the original trilogy, it's a small band of rebels versus... Okay, so the biggest army battle we really saw, we saw Hoth, which was a defense line of let's hold it until everybody escapes. We also saw Endor, which was primitive Ewoks toppling the superior galactic empire with all of their tech. Decisive as that battle is in the fandom of whatever you want to think, are Ewoks dumb, or is the empire deserving of being taken down by primitives? Either way, we're getting that stuff, and I always thought, why wasn't Legion in that in the first place? And for years, the X-Wing community has been actually asking for, we want droid starfighters, we want Clone Wars stuff, because this stuff is cool. And they kind of got there, because there was the ARC 170s that came out, and there was like this kind of like, oh yeah, no, it's just a really old ship that the Alliance is using. But I want the shiny new version. I want that Naboo Starfire with, like, where I blind myself because I flew too close to the sun, chrome paint job on it. Where's that stuff? Here it is. We're going to be getting it, and that's going to be, of course, in X-Wing 2.0 as they're ready to launch the second edition.
Since GenCon, they've also announced that they are doing a Clone Wars era tabletop to go along with the Edge of the Empire.
And don't forget, Disney also said, "Hey, we're bringing Clone Wars back."
I mean,
Like-
that's self-explanatory. I mean, we're 10 years here. We're gonna get the new season next year. We're also getting Star Wars Resistance coming out next year too. So I mean, we're coming into a very Star Wars heavy. We've been in a very Star Wars heavy time. It's about to get heavier, but
Yeah, very much.
I'm pretty okay with all that.
So yeah, that was the Star Wars brand announcements that they rolled out in Fantasy Flight, which was great. Good stuff. Everybody was excited. And as I'm taking notes and things like that, and they start launching this next reel, and it's like this sci-fi anime. I would look at it and went, "Oh, what is this? I'm not sure what they're talking." It's like, and that's a new IP, brand new IP, never before something. They create stuff off of Star Wars, Lovecraft. Like, they kind of recycle a lot of their things. Or get IPs from other people to make their games, and all of a sudden we don't always see originality in product from them. Mechanics, ideas, how they push things out, yes, but not necessarily the baseline what it is from. And they announced Keyforge, a one-of-a-kind, unique game is what they're posing this as. And the big idea is they got Richard Garfield came out with this idea, and according to him, this is they finally found a way to produce such a game, because that was the biggest question. And Richard Garfield is like the grandfather of CCGs with Magic the Gathering. You can probably attest to this. When we were kids, it was cool. I played Magic like everybody else did. Busted open his pack and got this crazy rare, super powerful green card that I never saw, knew existed. And I would slide it right into my deck and then play somebody and go, boom, here's this crazy creature. And they're like, what is that? And I'll go, I don't even know. It's crazy. And over the years, with the evolution of the internet and whole set list being spoiled and it becoming a monetary sort of system of, you bust that open, now you see it, if you're in the game, you're thinking that's a $40 card, that's a $20 card, it
almost like takes the fun out of it, because at the same time you open up a pack, and if you see a $40 card, you say, do I really want to play with this? Or it's a $40 card.
Right.
I'm hesitant to even shuffle my deck with it in there.
And the deck lists are so constrained of, this is my build, this is how it works, and these are the cards I need, this is what I need to buy. So he kind of talked about this and said, I want to bring that wonder, that uniqueness back of, you're the only kid in your neighborhood or your area or the world that has that. And that's where kind of the idea of Keyforge was born out of it mechanically. So the idea is you're going to have your randomized deck. It's the 36 card deck with a faction card that has the deck list on it. That is your deck. There's no deck building. There's no modifying it. That is what you play with. You crack it open, that's your deck. I crack one open, that's my deck, now we play. So it's going to take back to that wonder of like, oh, what's in your deck? What's in my deck? We don't know until we actually, play each other and encounter it. And you're going to get each deck's going to have 3 of the houses of the 7 different houses, and the combinations are in the quadrillions, they say, as far as the card pool, how many of this card is in there. We might have the same 3 houses in both our decks,
but the cards
are going to be all different. The card quantity of each copy, the types, whatever. It's all going to be different, and it's a very interesting mechanic. And I went, okay, you got my interest. $40 starter set that comes with all the tokens, so that you can like have your little keys that you forge, and then your tokens for Amber, 2 learn to play decks, and then 2 random decks that are the learn to plays are going to be every starter set's the same 2. They're designed to teach you the game between those 2 decks, and then you take the other 2, and that's what you really play with. And then from that point forward, it's $10 for a new deck. Cool. Okay, that's not an unusual price point. It sits in a nice niche market. Yes, it's more expensive than a Magic Pack or a Destiny Booster or whatever random CCG that you play.
I'd say it's on point when you buy like a pre-made deck, though.
Right.
So that's why it's great. I mean, the other thing too is I legitimately had an intervention with Star Wars Destiny because I couldn't stop buying boxes. The people who loved me the most told me I had to move on. So this is something that's going to make it so that you're not tempted to just keep buying boxes of it. Trying to make that one deck. Trying to go after the meta. Trying to...
That is one of those legitimate fears out there is crack a deck, look through it, go, oh, that's crap, next. Crack a deck, look through it, oh, that's crap, next. Until you get that magic deck that feels like it's a winner. I'm sure there's going to be people out there doing that. It's the nature of a randomized collectible universe, and there's going to be decks that are going to be overpowered, and there's going to be decks that are underpowered, and that's just going to be the kind of the nature of the beast at that point. I was talking with some of the guys at Fantasy Flight, just kind of trying to pick their brain of how, from an organized play level, how they're going to control that, and they all the deck lists have a QR code, and if they do find that there is a particular build or deck out there that the random generator number just spat out and it's like this super powerful, can't be beat deck, they have a way of limiting it in national tournaments and saying, no, that deck isn't allowed. It's going to be rough, I think, from both perspectives, because great, that keeps it like, okay, we know that's a banned deck. Unless you're actually following it, how do you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be more, we have to wait and see how that rolls out. That's going to be fourth quarter, and they were very excited about that. So it's a new thing, and they actually announced another board game with that same uniqueness rule called Discovery. You saw this?
No, I didn't. I missed that one.
So that wasn't actually in the Fantasy Flight report, but that came out a week or 2 later. So under that same unique game banner where you buy a box, it's not quite a legacy game because your contents are going to be different than my copy. So we may be exploring the Arctic in yours, where mine's a forest jungle or desert. The character mix-up is going to be different. Our goals in the games are going to be slightly different. They're going to have the same flavor, per se, but your game's going to be definitely different from mine as we explore and play.
Interesting.
They're the same game, but they're not the same game. They were trying to not make it a legacy game, but it's the easiest way of trying to understand what this new genre is. And that's really what it is. It's a new genre of games, and if it works, great.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested in seeing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We'll really find out if it's going to pay off or not. So that was the Fantasy In-Flight report. That was like this big, grandiose, like way above my expectations, because each announcement kind of just tried to top the next one. Now, granted, if I was building a presentation, that's exactly how I would build it. Start small, grow big, and then just wow them at the end. You don't want to open with, your Homestar Runner. Though, my opinion, they possibly did, because Arkham Horror 3rd Edition is amazing. Asterisk, until we get the full game and really realize what we got ourselves into. That was day 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for that was a hell of a day 0. full of a lot of excitement. I mean, that started, I want to say, at like 7, ended at 9, so it was a 2-hour presentation.
Day one, this is where we actually had some events that we wanted to do and try things out. First thing we did that day, besides get to the con and go, wow, there's everything everywhere, was the Arkham Horror card game LCG event, The Eternal Slumber.
Yeah.
I taught you this game 2 days early.
Yep.
And then we muddied through it very poorly mainly because I misread a few things. Graciously, though, I want to say and give a shout out and thanks to Matt Newman, who was kind of walking around the event as we were all kind of playing through the scenario and going, how are you guys doing? What do you like and what do you not like? And literally taking a live pulse of the player pool as we played it. 100% called us out on, you guys are playing on the wrong side of that card. You're actually using the hard tokens, not the easy tokens. Oh. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for making it a little bit easier on us, even though it was super brutal already.
Yeah, I mean, we played it a few more times throughout the week, and I would say even if we played it on the easiest the first time, we probably still would have got whomped. For all you who are not familiar with LCGs, those are living card games. So instead of picking up packs and digging through them, trying to find your cards, they have sets that they put out that they tell you exactly what's in there, and then you can build your deck off of that. So luckily for me, Justin is very deep, quite a few copies of everything. He's able to put me together a deck, as well as put himself together a deck to play together.
Right.
And both of them worked very well together. So
that was my design goal behind them. Is if we took either one of those decks and ran solo, they would literally fall apart. But together, they kind of formed a Voltron of sort.
Yeah.
Super Investigator that could also be useful if we got it, because walking in, we didn't know how that event was necessarily going to be set up. I've done some of their official events before. Last year it was very regulated with Elaborate of Lunacy. This year was very loose and go. Here's your pack, go play. Here's a sheet, fill this out, tell us how you did. Which is awesome, because how we did at GenCon / everybody else who got into the event and did it and reported all that is going to impact the choices available for those players who are going to Arkham Knights. And those players at Arkham Knights are either going to have, I'm just going to be honest, they're going to have a tougher time, because that scenario at GenCon was not easy.
Yeah.
Like you said, we played it a couple times throughout the weekend with, in our downtime at our place, and it was this, okay, we got better each time, because we kind of knew what we needed to do a little bit better each time. But man, that first run through was rough.
I mean, I would even say out of we played it 3 times together, and then I played it 1 time with a friend of ours, and out of my 4 times playing it, we only won once. So
there is no winner or losing in Arkham Horror. It's just delaying the inevitable.
We only advanced to the end. Made it all the way to the end once. They did throw in a few new mechanics. I know, and I'm not 100% familiar with the game itself, but you did tell me some of the things, like Abyss was new.
Right. I don't want to talk about it too much in case someone's listening and hasn't played it yet, because one of the magical things about Arkham Horror, the card game, is that very first time you play through it, you have no idea what you're walking into, and there's a very unique experience. But yeah, they had a sliding scale mechanic where they called the Strength of the Abyss. Certain card effects would make this worse or better. For the most part, it just made things worse. And to make it better was very hard, if not impossible at some points in our playthroughs. That mechanic was very interesting, and a new thing that I hadn't seen them do in the card game yet, as well as there was an exploration factor that was a little bit different from the regular card game based on the scenario. They had some neat new stuff in there, along with a lot of the traditional tropes. So it was a lot of fun. That was our big first event. After that, we had a little bit of break in time, and we went and explored the vendor hall. Which, honestly, I'll tell you, the last time I went to GenCon, that's like all I did. For that one day, I just wandered that hall. And that was, I want to say at least a decade ago. In the sense of, it is so much bigger now. Over the weekend, I probably dedicated 2 days to the vendor hall without even doing other events. and I think I saw everything.
Yeah,
I guarantee you I am not correct in that assumption.
Yeah.
But I feel like if I want to say I got 95%, I am feeling good about that.
There was some sort of siren song going on. They were just drawing us straight in there. And yeah, every time I went into that dealer's room, I saw something new. I saw somehow a different corner. You'd think they'd run out of corners, but yeah, there's corners
everywhere.
Yeah.
And what's funny is there would be that aisle that you're like, I swore I walked through this. And what you realize is you were looking at the left-hand side the entire time, and looking at all the booths on the left-hand side. And the right-hand side you never even saw, though you walked past it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I've been to other conventions, and I've never felt that, not necessarily sense of wonder, but endless wonder that dealer hall has. Plus demos everywhere. Like, come on, sit down, try this game, let's talk. Okay, great, what do you got?
Yeah.
Which is also where you lose a lot of time.
Yeah.
Because those demos can take some time. So we can explore that, got our lunch, came back, and we had our Lord of the Rings event. Lord of the Rings, the LCG. They had their GenCon event, which was very unique, because normally the event is, here's the event, this is what we do, this is the scenario, go. And they're always standalone scenarios, but they're pre-constructed scenarios. This was the Wizards Challenge this year was very interesting in the sense of there was a series of numbered encounter cards, and we literally built our own encounter deck of what we wanted to face. We had multiple goals to choose from. Not being veteran players in this particular game yet, I'm still kind of getting my feet wet into the card game. Love the Lord of the Rings in general, but the card game world is definitely a deep dive.
Yeah, and just like Arkham Horror, this event was my second time playing Lord of the Rings, so again, Rebel Gamer, I just dive right in.
Which is great, because then you can give this very fresh perspective of, we built the scenario, played with another gentleman and his son. Arguably, his son knew more about this game than both of us combined.
That kid was good. He was real good.
That's just how new we are to that particular game. I enjoyed it, though. And I definitely want to explore more of that. And after seeing how they played and seeing how their decks work versus what we kind of threw together, thinking, hey, these cards sound fun, let's play these. Wow. Yeah, no, there's a different level of deck building. And that game is very different from Arkham Horror in the sense of you almost build your deck to the scenario that you're going to try to attempt. Where Arkham Horror, you build your character, and your deck is your character, where Lord of the Rings, your deck is just a bunch of stuff, and then your characters are out in front of you. So, different aspects. One definitely inspired the next one, and it's a natural evolution of the franchise and the gaming mechanics. But that was a lot of fun and very tough. Very tough.
Yeah.
And that kind of took us through the end of what the dealer hall time frame had. We didn't really get the chance to sneak back in there for that day. But what are your thoughts? Day one, Gen Con, never been before, boom, all in front of you.
It was a lot to take in all at once. I felt like we got, with all the time that we had there, we got a lot done. Got to play a few games. The dealer's hall, I mean, like you said, that's a time sink. All of a sudden you look around and you say, oh, we've got to be the next event right now.
Oh yeah, and that next event's like a quarter mile away. Yeah. Because, everything's huge.
Was that the day that we both picked up some pretty heavy items?
Yes.
So one thing we will forewarn you about is, if you're thinking about buying anything, make sure you got somewhere to put it or a nice bag, because a lot of the bags the dealers give you, while they may be nice little tote bags, when there's 60 pounds worth of wood in it, looking at you, Justin.
Whoa. Just because I went a little crazy at Broken Token.
It'll cut off circulation.
Yeah, it did.
On top of all the Legion and X-Wing and everything that I bought.
And I have to thank you for being my Samwise Gamgee and bearing my burden when I couldn't at some points, and vice versa. Yeah, no, that's definitely... We did not have a conjoined hotel. We had some friends who did, and they were very gracious for us to steal their hotel key, run up to the room, and drop stuff up in their room when we needed it. If you have a connected hotel, take advantage of that. Or if you don't, or don't want to make those runs, plan those purchases out, be a little bit smarter, buy it near the end of the day.
Drive one day and then pay for parking, because the $30 you'll spend on parking will save your fingertips. You can just run onto the car real quick, throw everything in there, and get right back into the game.
So that I will say is our day one lesson, is be a little bit smarter with your purchasing of when you're going to purchase, or at least have a plan to do something with it.
I didn't learn that lesson that entire weekend.
I know you didn't.
I just kept buying stuff, and I kept killing my fingers. Eventually I bought lesson 2. There's probably a guy selling a board game bag. Found one. They sold tables, gaming tables. But for $20, they would sell you a backpack, and that was, although it made me very, very elongated, was very comfortable.
You turtled.
I turtled.
You literally turtled with it. I could shove you over, and all you would do is just like flail your little arms and be stuck.
I took a few people out.
Yeah. So I think that about settles it for today, and our inaugural episode. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, listening, giving us a shot. I hope you continue to tune in, listen, download us on whatever podcasting service you have available to you. Do plan on going through the rest of GenCon next, but then we have other things that we want to touch base on. I want to talk about the hobby in general, get a little bit more into some of the terminologies that you hear, LCG, CCG, tabletop miniatures versus Euro games versus Ameritrash. All these different terminologies, because it's a hobby and there's a vocabulary attached to it. So I kind of want to, at least dedicate some time to things like that and kind of get that. You may already be in this hobby and this is not news to you, but maybe it is. Or maybe it's a term that you haven't heard. Recently this year, I kind of heard the term FOMO for the first time. I say it FOMO. FOMO.
Yeah, I know exactly what that means, but for our listeners, can you...
Fear of missing out.
Oh, no, actually, I knew what that was.
Yeah, so...
I gave you the blankest look.
You did. You were like, I have no idea what you're saying.
I think I even told you FOMO over the weekend.
Yeah. And a lot of that came out of the new resurgence of Kickstarter, and that's another topic, like Kickstarter. What are we looking at? What's a good Kickstarter? What's a bad Kickstarter? What's your experience? What's not your experience? Talking about things like friendly local gaming stores. And what you like, what you don't like. We happen to be in an area that is very dense in stores. I can literally drive within 30 minutes to about a dozen different stores. Not everybody has that, and if you don't have that sort of accessibility, I'm sorry. It is a beautiful thing to have. But there are some stores that do things differently or better or worse, and I've kind of seen the gambit over the 20 years. And I want to talk about that too, of like going to a store and definitely having a retail background myself, working in a store that sold board games, and where my expectations are from not only that retail perspective, but that shopper perspective. A lot more to come. Definitely keep us in mind. Tabletop Acranum is just getting off the ground, so
we do have a Facebook page currently. We are working on the rest of our social media. We will be uploading this also to YouTube and a few other services. Just stay tuned. We'll make sure to keep the information coming in regards to everything else.
Absolutely.